Okay, I wanted to read the life of certain saints, like the lives of certain saints. And I had this very old book, it's very rare. And it's called the Catholic Child's Lives of the Saints. This is the first edition, actually, by Reverend Chisholm. Okay, Reverend Chisholm. Chisholm, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the date on this book is 1887. So it's very old. And there's different saints in the book. And and I can read from the other ones, but I'll probably do this in a couple of videos. I don't want to make the videos extremely long. But maybe I could do this in 2-3 videos. But I want to read about this little saint that I love. This is Saint Germaine Cousin. Okay, Saint Germaine, Germaine, and then the second part there is Cousin. Now, she's a French saint, and she's not well known in America as far as I'm concerned. She's the saint of the abused and handicapped people. I especially liked her because she's the saint of the abused, and when I read her life for the first time, I was almost in tears at how this poor girl was abused. Her story really reminds me, in certain respects, of Cinderella. I'm blessed to have quite a few of her first-class relics. I just love her for some reason. And, well, I'm part French. That's one of the reasons. And the second reason is because I can relate to her in certain respects. She's in paradise. We know that. and of course, these are dangerous times we're living in. And if you haven't noticed, you need to start looking around. Society's deteriorating rapidly. And, I mean, it will renew itself eventually, but, on the way down, it's not pleasant. And one reason is because they've gotten God and thrown him out the door. And, this is just not going to be tolerated much longer. But we need the saints as our allies and our friends, and we should learn about their lives, okay? Because, these are the people that really are the stars, the superstars, not the people on TV. These are the superstars. So, let me read about Saint Germaine, and I'm just reading from this book to the best of my ability. And forgive me if I pronounce the French words incorrectly. I studied Latin, but not necessarily French, though French is beautiful. And I'm going to read as far as I can, and then I'll just do like part 1, part 2, something like that. Okay? Not far from Toulouse, in the south of France, stands the little village of Pibrac, Pibrac. It is situated in a valley which is watered by a small stream called the Coubert, and is surrounded by the scenery of the greatest beauty. It happened in the year 1664 that the sexton of that village was opening a grave near the pulpit in the parish church. Suddenly, in his great surprise, his spade struck against a coffin which he did not expect to find there. Now, a sexton is someone who takes care of the church, okay? Like a maintenance guy. Okay. Hold on, just trying to turn the page. He raised it out of the grave and, through curiosity, opened the lid. His surprise was greater still when he saw what it contained. In it lay the body of a young woman about 20 years of age, fresh and uncorrupt, as if newly dead, meaning she still had her flesh, she wasn't a skeleton, and looking as if lying in a calm and peaceful sleep. A few drops of blood were issuing from a little wound which the spade had made. Some people who had come to hear Mass ran to the spot at the cry of the surprise which the old man uttered. Like him, they were astonished at what they saw, for there was no sign of corruption about the body. The flesh was soft and lifelike, and the grave linen quite entire, as if it had been put on that very day. In her hands she held a little taper, and on her head was a wreath made of ears of wheat and of flowers looking as fresh and beautiful as if they had been newly culled. The news of this discovery soon reached the village, and all the people ran to the place to see for themselves the wonderful event of which they had just heard. "Who can this be?" they said one to another. "We never knew of anyone who had been buried here." Among the crowd of people whom curiosity had brought to the church was a very old woman. She could not walk as fast as the others on account of her old age, and was thus amongst the last to arrive at the grave. When she reached the spot and was near enough to see the body, she began to tremble. "Oh," said she, with emotion, "I know who that is. I know her by that mark on her neck, and by her paralyzed arm and hand. This is Germaine Cousin, the pious shepherdess of whom you have so often heard me speak. I was one of those who prepared her for her grave. It was I who placed all around her those ears of wheat, which you see quite fresh, for she died in the harvest time, and that garland of flowers upon her head, which looks as fair as when I placed it there, more than 40 years ago." Oh my God, this is indeed wonderful. Now, Saint Germaine, she had a disease called scrofula, which is some sort of disease that makes sores on the body, and hers was around her neck area. And the poor thing had a paralyzed arm, deformed. Just makes me sad to think about it. And anyway, she died, and then her body was incorrupt, which is a sign from God of holiness and sanctity. And boy, was she. Sadly, after she was made saint, the revolutionaries, who were not nice in the French Revolution, who were very anti-Catholic. The French Revolution was an anti-Catholic revolution, started by people who hated the Catholic faith and hated Christianity and hated the saints. They were not heroes, okay? Contrary to the propaganda you might have heard. They took poor Saint Cousin's body and threw it in the ground with lime so that it would dissolve and decay. That's what they did. And the faithful rescued the body, but it was deformed after they did that. But for 40 years after her death, her body was corrupt. Okay. Anyway, let me continue. The story of the old woman and the miraculous preservation of the body made the people inquire into her history. And this is what they found out about her. Nearly 70 years before that time, there lived in Pibrac a man whose name was Lawrence Cousin. His wife was called Mary Lachey. They were poor, for their only fortune consisted of a few sheep which were allowed to graze on the pasture lands and hills in the neighborhood. Like the rest of the people of the village, they had to earn their daily bread by the sweat of their brow. But they were both good Christians and possessed that treasure which is above all price, the peace of a good conscience. And boy, that is a treasure. Regret is quite a demon. They had only one child, a little girl who was called Germaine, and it's a beautiful name. She was weak and sickly from the day of her birth and was covered with sores from head to foot. Poor thing. Her little limbs were also deformed, and her right hand and arm were paralyzed. Mary loved her feeble child tenderly. She bestowed on her all the care which only a mother can give, and tried by the most loving solicitude to soothe her pains. But God wished Germaine to grow up in the school of suffering. He took this good mother to himself when Germaine was only 3 or 4 years old. Young as she was, the little child felt her great loss. But even at that tender age, she tried to practice the virtue of resignation to the will of God, which she had learned from a pious mother. So the poor thing, not only did she come out in this world deformed, poor, but she lost her mother. For some time after her mother's death, Germaine was left to the mercy of strangers. Her father was always busy at his work in the fields and could not attend to her. But these strangers were not like her mother. They soon became weary of nursing a child who required so much attention. When Lawrence saw this, he married again, in the hope that his second wife would take the place of the one he had lost, and love his little Germaine as her own mother had done. For a short time, the little girl was happy and comfortable. But as years flew past and other children began to appear in the home of Lawrence, there came a great change. The new mother, full of affection for her own little ones, began to neglect Germaine. She was naturally a cross and selfish woman, and she treated the deformed girl with the greatest cruelty. This is like a wicked stepmother, like like Cinderella. She could not even bear to see her in the house and never said to her one kind word. Terrible. Germaine bore patiently her cruel blows and still more cruel words, so she hit the poor girl. Her Father in heaven, who took delight in the immaculate innocence of the orphan, poured into her soul the gift of his love, which made her feel happy and even joyful in the midst of her sufferings. I mean, Germaine was like incredibly patient, this girl. Incredibly. I could never be like this girl. It's unbelievable. One day when Germaine was about 8 years old, her stepmother said to Lawrence, "You must send that girl away at once. If you let her stay any longer in this house, the rest of the children will soon be covered with sores like herself." Well, she had this scrofula, is what I'm saying, on her neck. And, they were afraid of contagion. But there was really nothing to worry about. These words pierced Lawrence to the very heart, for he loved his child. Yet he did not dare to contradict his haughty wife. He tried at first to find some excuse for keeping Germaine at home, but his wife would not listen to him. And as she now had her own way in everything, he at length told her she could do as she liked with the child. So Germaine was told one day that she must never again play with her little brothers and sisters, whom she loved even more than herself, and that she would have for the time to come to go and take care of her father's sheep. So they put her out in the field, no education or anything. Poor thing. It was a heavy heart that the poor motherless child next morning left her father's house, which she was never again to be allowed to enter. And when towards the end of the first day she returned home faint and weary, and her mother threw her some hard crusts of bread, which her own children had cast away, and told her that she was to sleep all night under the staircase in the barn. Her little heart became too full of sorrow, and a flood of tears burst forth from her eyes. Silently she took up the hard crusts and tried to eat them. Then, creeping to her lonely bed, which was made up of a heap of rough vine branches, she fell asleep. You imagine your own father lets you sleep in the barn with the animals because of this wicked stepmother. Really. So now she has to sleep out there with the poop and the urine in the hay, right? Where it's cold in the winter. This poor thing. And eat crusts of bread, not getting proper nutrition. But her Father above did not leave her alone. He sent down his holy... Hold on. This is a very old book. His holy angels from heaven to watch over her, and gave her his grace to make her understand that this harsh treatment could not happen but by his permission, and that it would be the means of making her love him more. Well, she became a saint. I mean, this woman was amazing. He showed her also that in return for this short life of sorrow on earth, he would give her an eternal one of joy in heaven. One cold night in the wintertime, a villager was passing near the barn in which the child lay. Suddenly he heard the sound of sweet music. It seemed to come from the barn. Being astonished at this, he drew near, and looking through the chinks of the door, which is a crack, saw Germaine on her knees in prayer. All around her shone a beautiful light, and the angels who were keeping her company sang to her the music of heaven. Unbelievable that this girl, right, had heaven come to her, because God knew of her sufferings. On the banks of the Corbeil, the river there, farthest from the village, there stands at the present day the trunk of an old oak tree covered over with moss and ivy. It was here, under its wide spreading arms, that the little shepherdess of Pibrac practiced those heroic and simple virtues that made her a saint. I would love to visit her village one day. I would love to. At the foot of the oak, there was a cross made of 2 rough pieces of wood. Germaine had erected it that she might pray before it to him who died on the cross for her, and that by looking at it, she might receive courage to carry her own cross. But it was not the cross only that put in her mind of God, for everything around her spoke to her of him. The fragrant flowers in summer and the dry leaves chased by the wind in autumn invited her to love God. Thus, her solitary life became to her a life of happiness, not because she was at a distance from her cruel stepmother, but because she lived in the presence of him whom she loved with her whole heart. And all these beautiful things seemed fairer to her because he whom she thus loved had made them. Sometimes in the places to which she led her flock, she would meet other children of her own age, who had come to play in the woods, or to gather the wild flowers on the mountains or in the fields. Germaine never mingled in their games because she preferred to be alone. If at times she spoke to them, it was only to make them think of God and of heavenly things. These little children, attracted by her gentleness, forgot her deformities and would sit down beside her and learn from her beautiful prayers and listen with reverent attention to the simple instructions she gave them. And when they left her, they felt happier for the few moments they had spent in her company. I'm going to leave it there for now and continue the next video, but let me just reflect for a moment. Here she is, the poor thing, suffering so much, but the angels came to comfort her. God sent her comfort. See, he doesn't abandon those who really seek him. He won't. He won't. If you really call out to him, he comes. He listens. I know this for a fact. I know this for a fact. My own experience. And there's Germaine, and there she is teaching other children, right, about God. What an incredible person. So anyway, let's leave it there as part 1. I don't want to tire you out. It's a long video. And then I'll do part 2. If I can do it tomorrow or the next night, I will. But I'll definitely get it up. I'll get it up there for you guys to finish. Okay? Finish the life. Look her up, boy. She's magnificent. Saint Germaine Cousin. Okay, have a great night. Thank you. Bye-bye.